Welcome back, everyone, to Arcade Coffee. How are you doing? This is basically the first official episode because the first episode was the review of Resident Evil Requiem, my vision, my ideas, and my thoughts about Resident Evil Requiem. And this one is the first canon episode. I was supposed to talk about Remedy because last summer 2025, was the 30th anniversary of Remedy Entertainment. And I wanted to talk about Remedy since I played basically every game they made in these 30 years except the first one, the rally games. I played basically a demo, but I never played the whole game because I'm not really into cars games, so it's my personal taste. But every other game I played all of them, and I would like to share some thoughts about Remedy. But then the other day was the 22nd of March, and it was the 30th anniversary of the release of the first Resident Evil, the 1996 masterpiece of Resident Evil, and it was released in Japan on the 22nd of March 1996, and it was the 30th anniversary. I was like, okay, let's do this. Let's do a tier list, but at the same time, it's gonna be kind of a journey down memory lane where I remember about Resident Evil as a saga, what was its meaning, what meant for the, not just for the industry but for the players, because I'm a video game enthusiast talking to other video game enthusiasts. So here is a chill space. We come here to talk, to have a chat, to share opinion, to share thoughts about stuff, to share memories, whatever. It's a safe space where we can talk about games. And I'm gonna just tell you this: I'm not gonna include in this tier list all the spin-off episode, and I'm not going to include Code Veronica and Resident Evil 0. And the reason is very simple. Code Veronica, I basically saw a playthrough of the whole game. So I know the story, I know the mechanics, I know everything, but I never actually played the game. Just because it never happened. That's it. There is no big mystery, or it's not like that I disliked Code Veronica. I'm very excited to find out if the remake actually exists and is gonna come out, and the second is gonna come out. I'm gonna play it. I'm gonna be very happy to play it. And Resident Evil 0 as well. I know the story. I know the lore. I know everything that is necessary to know, but I haven't played. I basically know everything about it. I saw a gameplay of the first hour or so, but I never went through myself a whole run. And I stopped myself to watch an entire playthrough just because I always was like, okay, I'm gonna definitely play this someday, but I never did. At least so far. Maybe in the future I'm gonna play it. Before they're talking about the fact that they're probably making a remake of Resident Evil 0 as well. But I think I will play it at some point, just for the sake of play the whole saga, the whole original saga. But anyway, I'm gonna talk about Resident Evil 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8, and of course Requiem. So I'm gonna do a tier list of those games, and this is what it is today. So it's going down memory lane, and I want to start with a memory. So the first time I went to a store to buy Resident Evil, I have here with me, if you are watching the video version, the actual Platinum Collection. I don't know if in the United States there was the same thing, but in Europe there was the Platinum Collection, and it's in Italian. If you check the cover in the back, there is Spanish and Italian language. If you check, if you can see the background of the game. And it's amazing. It's fantastic. I remember the excitement because when it was released, I grew up to be as a PC gamer because my father was very into technology, was into PC, and I said in Italian for a second, but anyway, PC instead of PC. Anyway, sorry about that. But anyway, my first PC was an Amiga 500. That was my first PC, but then we moved into Windows environment. I play on Commodore 64 as well. I played on different machine. But since my father was a PC enthusiast, first time I tried Resident Evil was on a PC because a friend of mine had a copy and he came over, he installed it, and we started to play. But then I don't remember how, whatever happened, but I couldn't play because I didn't have his CD. He didn't lend me the game. I didn't borrow the game from him. So a couple of days later, I went with my father to a store, and they had the PlayStation version. This is the manual, the amazing manual with the all the drawing about the original PlayStation, and this is fantastic. There is not much. There is the control, the explanation, the mapping of the controls, and it's fantastic. It's from another era of gaming, you know, another moment in time in gaming history. But anyway, amazing. And I remember the excitement when I came home, because this is one of the things that in a way we lost, the excitement of buying a game and then hold it your little hand. I was a kid. I was born in 1987, so in 1996, 7, when the game was released in Italy, I think it was released in Italy in 96 as well. But in 96, I was basically 10 years old, because I was born in July, and so I was a kid. I shouldn't have played this, but my father was really okay with it. And in fact, in the background, there is the sort of Peggy for 18 years old of age. I was not supposed to play it, but he bought it for me, and then I played. And I played it anyway, and it was super scary, and took me ages to finish this game, because for me it was very difficult. For a 9 years old kid, Resident Evil with tank control and everything was very difficult. But one thing that we lost, as I was saying, is the thrill of buying a game. I remember the whole journey was holding my game and staring at the cover, like in excitement to come home and put it on my PlayStation and start to play. It was something else, and it was insane. Plus, I don't know where are you from where you are listening. Maybe you are from the United States, and maybe back then it was super easy in the United States to buy video game. But in Italy, even if it's a big market, the Italian market, because we buy a lot of video games, there are a lot of video game enthusiasts in Italy. There is a huge community of gamer. But anyway, back then in the 90s, if you were living in a huge city like Milan, Rome, Naples, it was a little bit easier to buy a video game. But for the majority of the country, because mostly of the people lives in a small town outside the big cities, it was a different story. In my town, in the United States, sometimes you say, "Oh, I come from a small town," and you ask how many people, and maybe there are 100,000 people. In Italy, when we talk about small town, for example, the one where I grew up in, we talk about, when I was a kid, there were 4,000 people. That was the population. And now that is bigger, it's like double the time. So it's 8,000 people, but still, it's a small town. And it's in the countryside. And if I wanted to buy a video game, I needed to go with my parents to the closest city. That is Crema. Crema is the city that, if you have ever seen the movie Call Me By Your Name, it's where there is the whole scene with them riding the bicycle. So in Crema there was a huge shopping center, one of the first shopping center that was opening back then, because we didn't have that kind of concept of the huge shopping center. It wasn't something that existed. And inside they had as well an aisle for video games. And then if I wanted to buy video games, I could go there with my parents when they were going there to buy grocery, and then I could buy as well a video game. But it was something else. I mean, back then, piracy in Italy was very common, also because it was very difficult for the majority of the country to buy video games. It was also because of that. It was a practical way. Even if you listen to the story of the guys from CDPR, CD Projekt Red, they started GOG. GOG is one of the projects started by some of the founder of CD Projekt Red. And basically what they said was that back then, since it was many games were not being released in Poland, many games they couldn't have access to them, they couldn't buy them, and so piracy was a way to actually play those games. And they basically created GOG, because they wanted to have a fair way to play those games even with modern machine, and so in a way to kind of give back after the fact that they actually used piracy for so long. And it was a common thing in many places in Europe because video gaming wasn't a big thing as it is today. But anyway, I remember the thrill of trying Resident Evil. And so after the memory lane part, let's start with the actual tier list. And so I want to start from the bottom, of course. The Resident Evil game that I love the least, and the one that, to be perfectly honest, I haven't completed. I dropped this game. I tried and then I dropped it. And it is Resident Evil 6. Resident Evil 6 was the game that basically almost killed the Resident Evil saga. It's a game that at some point was like, everybody was like, okay, Resident Evil is cooked. Resident Evil is gone. There is no coming back from this. And for a long time, we all thought that this was the case. Because what happened with Resident Evil 6 is that, I don't know if some of you have played or at least know the concept of the game. Basically, the game has a 4 different main character, and 4 different, basically, story. They are connected, but the way the story is connected is kind of messy because you can choose basically which story you want to play first, second, and third, and fourth. You can do whatever you like, but the way it's mixed, the way it comes together, it's very sloppy in a way. But plus, the problem was that the Resident Evil franchise went basically full action. It was no longer a survival horror because Resident Evil, it's basically the saga, the kind of the saga that created the modern survival horror, and I'm gonna talk about that later on when we reach the first release of Resident Evil. But anyway, he departed from that choice, and the game was super rooted into action. And even the idea of a game that has always been very over the top, even in the way that the storytelling works, it's way over the top. It's what it is. Even taking in consideration how Resident Evil it is and was born, this game was way over the top. It was way crazy. It was way crazier than any other Resident Evil. And for many, it was just trash. Pile burning pyramid of garbage. And for many people was that, and I dropped it. I mean, I tried. A friend of mine lent me the game. I tried, and it was like, nope, I don't like it. Nope. And I was already kind of disappointed by Resident Evil 5, and playing Resident Evil 6 was like, okay, the saga is gone, because it was too ridiculous. It was too ridiculous. The gameplay was too ridiculous. The way the story was told, everything was very ridiculous. And that's it. The magic was gone. To be honest, if to be 100% honest, and to defend Capcom. When it was released, it was 2012. Back then, was Xbox 360 and PS3 generation. Back then, horror game were not a big thing. There was a moment in time where, for some reason, the industry decided that horror genre wasn't a big deal. I mean, I remember that back then there was Dead Space. Let me check. Dead Space was maybe 2008. Yes, 2008. But by the time they released Dead Space 3, that was 2013, the year after Resident Evil 6, the franchise was destroyed. Because if you remember, Dead Space 3 took the decision, EA basically, if I remember correctly, imposed the decision to make this game super action. Dead Space, I loved the first one. I kind of loved the second one. The third one, I was like, this is a pile of garbage. Because it went from a kind of a horror game with tense moment to a full action. Don't worry about the enemies. Anyway, you have so much ammo, so many ammos, and such a gun power that you're gonna overcome any obstacle. You are the Doom Slayer. So the idea of survival horror was gone. The whole thing was gone. In fact, Alan Wake, the first Alan Wake from 2010 was released. Alan Wake. It was received not that well because the industry and the gamer, for some reason, they were not digging horror games. The whole scene was coming down, and every executive, every producer thought that going action, basically build action horror, was the way, but they were wrong. They were colossally wrong. And Resident Evil 6, so because of that, it's a pile of garbage. I don't like it, and I think, as I was saying, the only thing that I can say to justify Capcom is that they tried according to what they thought it was the best course of action. So that's what happened. But then, as I was saying before, a game that I didn't like one bit. I kind of like some part of it. I played, but it was as well kind of over the top, was Resident Evil 5. And I put this just above Resident Evil 6 because this game as well took a turn to be an action game. I wasn't playing an horror game. I wasn't playing a survival game. I was playing an action horror with a narrative that it was very soap opera-ish. Yes, was like a soap opera. Resident Evil turned into something way over the top and insane. As I was saying before, the beginning of the franchise itself, it's basically rooted into the idea of horror and survival horror, but it was rooted as well into the idea of B horror movies with monsters and stuff like that. In Japan, they dig it a lot. In fact, they really like David Lynch and stuff like that, but they also like to have those kind of monsters, weird monsters. In fact, Resident Evil, the Tyrant, the whole thing, it's because they love that kind of evolution of horror, that interpretation. But Resident Evil 5 was moving away, was the first game that I think what they thought was Resident Evil 4 works so well because we move into a more action kind of gameplay. So let's basically raise the bar a little bit. Let's move toward a full action kind of game, and it didn't work. I didn't like this game as much as I loved Resident Evil 4. It was a disappointment. It was the beginning of the end. When they they basically created Resident Evil 5, and I played the game and I finished the game. I kind of enjoyed the game. I was like, okay, this is crazy. It's a big no-no. I didn't like the game. I don't have fond memory of Resident Evil 5. I think it doesn't work. And just above Resident Evil 5, we have another game that basically makes a similar mistake. And it's Resident Evil Village. Resident Evil Village, I think it's a game that makes a similar mistake that they have made in the past. I think the Resident Evil Village, in a way, it's the kind of game that here as well, this is what I think it happened. This is my personal interpretation of what happened. They basically took everything they learned from Resident Evil 7 and they were like, okay, by the time they started to design Village, they were making the remake of Resident Evil 4. And what had happened, I think, is that they went like, okay, people really love Resident Evil 4. So why don't we make a game that it's a follow-up of Resident Evil 7 that was very rooted into the first two Resident Evil, and then we make a game, a sequel, that is kind of rooted into Resident Evil 4, because the vibes of Village are very similar. Even if you check the architecture, the village itself, the castle, they are very rooted into something that is Resident Evil 4-ish, kind of, not the same, but the vibes are kind of there. But the problem is that Resident Evil 4, it's too actiony. I mean, there are too many elements of action. So the game has the perfect gameplay loop that usually Resident Evil game have. The perfect, like, the gameplay loop is always, okay, I have this area, I have to find every secret, solve puzzle, backtracking, and all those elements that basically make the game click, okay? They respect that logic. But if you play Resident Evil Village as intended per design, so you solve every puzzle, secondary puzzle, you upgrade everything, you go to the merchant like in Resident Evil 4, you upgrade your weapons and everything. Even in an early stage of the game, the first time I saw a big werewolf charging at me in Resident Evil, I had a shotgun. There was a military shotgun that was so powerful that I wasn't scared of him. It was like Doom. I was the Doom Slayer. I had no fear of the. It was not a menace for me. Every encounter wasn't problematic because I had so many weapons and so many ammo, and it was so powerful that it was more an action horror in first person than an actual Resident Evil game. So once again, they departed big time from the original root of Resident Evil, and they went into something more action. And in Resident Evil Village, there are some parts that are amazing. For example, the castles of, I don't remember the name of the vampire, Lady Dimitrescu. It's kind of Villa is Italian. Spencer Mansioni. I'm inventing words today. It's something that it's very kind of in the vibes of Spencer Mansion of the remake, okay, and that we're gonna discuss later about that. But anyway, it's there. It's kind of there. It's taking inspiration from that kind of things, but it's very short. The gameplay loop of that section, the mansion is not that big, and then everything turns to be kind of reminiscence of Resident Evil Village, Resident Evil 4. But then when you move the only part when you move into that the house of where there is the huge fetus that chase you around, you don't have weapons, you can't defend yourself, you're kind of more into a survival kind of logic, and then the game in that part very clicks. It's very anxious. You feel powerless. You feel in danger, but you have puzzle. You have stuff to find out. You have part of lore, and it's amazing. And I love that. But then, as soon as you have your weapons back and you go back to the gameplay design for Village, it's kind of ridiculous. And the last part of the game, the factory, the giant factory where you have the big guy with the, what was an hammer, giant hammer, I don't remember the weapon that he had. It's 100% ridiculous. It's again, it's the same mistake that they make with Resident Evil 4 and with Resident Evil 7 as well, but we're gonna discuss later on. It's a game that basically stretched too much the potentiality of his gameplay, and in the very last part of the game, it's too much. The factory part is too much, is annoying, is redundant. The part with the tank, sort of tank in the end, it's crazy. The part with Chris, that it's basically Call of Duty like, it's crazy. It's terrible. The final part of Resident Evil Village, it's terrible. I think it's awful. But it's still better than 5 and 6. Both on a technical level and on a design level, because at least the game, it's more similar to Resident Evil 4 than to Resident Evil 5 and 6. So it works in a way. And I don't like it, but I don't dislike it. It just, I think that there has a wasted potential. But it's there. But anyway, I liked way more Resident Evil 4. Resident Evil 4, I'm showing for the people watching the video the trailer of the remake, not the original. But this is the part where we start to talk about remakes and original. What I can say about Resident Evil 4, I'm going to talk on a general kind of level. I'm not going to highlight the difference between the original and the remake. I'm just going to say that I like the remake as much as I like the original. That's what I'm going to say, speaking of the two. But what I can say about Resident Evil 4 is that, as crazy as it is, but I played Resident Evil 4, I swear to God, on Nintendo Switch. Yeah, no, sorry, on Nintendo Wii. Was released in 20... When it was released? I have my list here. 2005 was released Resident Evil 4, and I played on Nintendo Wii because they made the Wii version, and I love the idea of the Wii mode used as a gun, and I played the whole game on Nintendo Wii. It wasn't the best quality, it wasn't the best experience, but still, even though I dig the game, I like it, I'm not gonna lie. And I have fond memory of my time with Resident Evil 4, the original game, as much as with the remake. I really enjoy it. I think that game works. And it works because it takes back everything they have done good with Resident Evil 2, because Resident Evil 3, we're gonna talk about this later, but it's sort of a spin-off of Resident Evil, even if it is not. But anyway, we'll talk about this later. And it takes back the main lore. Leon is back, is the main character, is a new character. There are new challenges. They evolved for the first time the T virus, whatever is the name, and they have the Las Plagas, and was very interesting as a new character. And I love Resident Evil 4, but at the same time, it's a game that has a problem. And the problem with Resident Evil 4 is that, once again, the final part is very redundant. The final part on the island, oh my dear God, I don't like it. It's basically the same as the part in the castles. The enemy are the same. They just are military. Instead of being a weird guy in a robe and with a shield made out of woods, it's a guy in a military outfit with a shield made out of metal. It's basically the same thing. It's a little bit more difficult because they are military and they shoot at you, but at the same time, that side of the gameplay, the dynamic, it's full of action choices, and it's very rooted into action as gameplay mechanics as the rest of the game, but push it to the limit. And the last part is something that I don't like to play. It's like, oh, okay, I want to get out of here. I want to finish the game. I can't take it anymore. I like it this far, but now it's the time to stop. But still, the game keeps going on. And the last part with the island and everything, it's very annoying. It's very annoying. I think in the original, if I remember correctly, the island wasn't that big. Probably was a smaller part. I don't remember. But still, the game, they have the same problem. They are, to what I like about Resident Evil, they go too far on the action side. Not too far, but still they go too much on the action side, and it's not something that I really am interested. And in fact, even if I'm a little bit bipolar about this choice, because sometimes I go like, yes, but Resident Evil has a gameplay loop that at the end of the day I like to replay more than this one. So speaking of replayability, that it's a big thing in survival horror. It's very an important part, so crucial for survival horror. But even taking this in consideration, sometimes I go like, oh, I rather prefer Resident Evil 4, or sometimes I said, no, I prefer, to be honest, I think it's more... it's something that I like more, Resident Evil 7. So Resident Evil 7 is the game that brought us back Resident Evil. So it's the game that made Capcom understand what they were supposed to do. And this is something very courageous that Capcom has done with the saga. This is something that the gamer loved deeply, and I love it as well, because Resident Evil 7, when they designed this game, I think the line of thoughts was the following. Basically, they understood that the horror genre went from third-person perspective to first-person perspective. Outlast and many other horrors that were super successful before Resident Evil 7 came out. They were all, yes, indie or AA experience, but all rooted into the idea of using the first person as a way of create immersive gameplay, okay? To put the player more into the horror and avoid to have the third person to create a sort of shield, a sort of layer separating the impact of some stuff, okay? To shield kind of the audience or the player in this case from whatever is happening in the game. So to create a more immersive experience, we switch to the first person. But at the same time, what they understood is that finally horrors were back, because this one was released in 2017, okay? And Resident Evil 6 was released in 2012. So basically, horror were finally back. So people were playing more horror game. It became thing. It became something that goes viral even on social media and stuff like that. The reaction to kind of horror games and stuff. So horrors are back. And they went like, okay, with Resident Evil 6, we made the mistake of pushing it too far. So we gotta go back. And so they introduces the first person, and they introduce the return to a mechanic that is more similar to the first Resident Evil game. So basically Resident Evil 7, the whole part in the mansion, it's basically the same as going back to Villa Spencer, Spencer Mansion. Sorry, I keep saying Villa Spencer because in Italian mansion is villa. So sorry if sometimes my brain does that. Just remember, villa is mansion is villa. So you will learn something new. But anyway, it's the same thing. So you have a main character looking for someone or something. In Resident Evil they were looking for the original squad sent on the Arklay Mountains for whatever is going on. Here, it's basically a main character, a new character, Ethan, going for he's looking for her wife. I think they were married. I don't remember, but it's a detail and doesn't matter. Because she's missing, he knows that somehow, somewhat she's there. He found the house, he steps in, and then the horror starts. The same as with the first Resident Evil. And the whole big chunk of the game, 2/3 of the game, are in the mansion. And as you explore the mansion, you have the same kind of gameplay that you have in Resident Evil 1. So that kind of gameplay loop with puzzles and limited resources, and a main character that has no big way to defend himself because he's a regular person in this case, and whatever is around is very horrific. This time around, since horror was back, but horror was more taken seriously, they push a little bit on the pedal. So and they decided to go all the way into the genre, so into the horror perspective, and this is scary as well. The Resident Evil 7 is also very scary, but it's also it has that perfect gameplay loop that Capcom can do when they design survival horror. And even speaking of the map design, the level design, the even some puzzle, they really resemble the original puzzle from Resident Evil. For example, the puzzle where you take the shotgun, and as soon as you take the statue move and the door closed, it's very similar to the thing with the shotgun in the original Resident Evil. The trap set up in Spencer Mansion is kind of different, but the conceptually is very the same. It's very similar. But anyway, and I love the fact that Resident Evil 7 went back to the original route. I love the fact that it's more kind of horror vibes. The horror vibes are very pushed to the limit. I like the fact that you have the ink ribbon. I love the fact that it goes back to the original kind of gameplay loop. And if you notice, the gameplay loop is the same from the original Resident Evil, except for Resident Evil 5, 6, and 4. But the game is always like that. You have a mansion or a police station or anyway whatever. Then you have a dungeon, a sewer, somewhere underground, and then you have the laboratory. It's always the same. This time around, the laboratory part is the ship. And the ship, I don't like the ship part. It's the same mistake as Resident Evil 4 and 8. And yeah, 4 and 8. They stretch the gameplay too much. Because the problem with Resident Evil 7 is that the enemy are all the same. The black thing, the black enemies, the black goo that turn into monster, they are all the same. They don't have a big impact on the player. And plus, by the time you're done with the mansion, you're like, so this is it. This is the end, because you forget that there is usually the laboratory. And then the laboratory is the ship, the laboratory and the ship. And the problem is that there you have two gameplay, the flashback gameplay and the gameplay with Ethan. And it's too much. The gameplay is as the kind of gameplay design that you have is Resident Evil 7. By the time you reach the ship, you have everything, but it's because there is nothing new that you can have from that game. No new particular enemies, no new particular location, trouble. And I'm gonna explain this better when we reach Resident Evil 2. And you're gonna find out why. But anyway, the gameplay is not renovating itself in a way that it's interesting and challenging for the player. And that's why sometimes I'm bipolar about this position, because I like Resident Evil 4 a little bit more, because the last part is a stretch of what that gameplay, the potential of the gameplay of Resident Evil 4, but it's not that bad. Resident Evil 7, the part with the boat, is kind of bad. Not because it's bad to play, it's badly developed, poorly developed or designed, just because it's too much. You have enough when you reach that part in the game. It's the last act of Resident Evil 7. It's kind of annoying. It's a kind of a bummer to me. at least. But still, the game is a very solid game. I like it. I think it's well designed. It's not bad. But believe me or not, just above Resident Evil 7, I will include Resident Evil 3 or Resident Evil Nemesis. So the sequel released in 1999, so the year after Resident Evil 2, and the same happened with the remake. So they released Resident Evil 2 in 2019, and in 2020 they released Resident Evil 3 Remake. So a year just later they released the sequel. And so I believe this game is the blueprint for all the mistake the Resident Evil is gonna make, not just with Resident Evil 4, but moving forward with Resident Evil 5 and 6, in a way. But it's also Resident Evil 3. I believe it's also a kind of a mistake, the kind of game that highlight the mistake that sometimes the industry do in those cases. So Resident Evil 2 was a big success. I'm not talking about just the remake. Also the original was a big thing. Also because there was a huge jump in technology, the render, the background and stuff like that. So they decided to make like super fast a sequel. They wanted to have another hit right away, and they make this game. And of course, that was kind of poorly designed because it was more action. It stopped to be a survival game. It was more action. The tyrant was everywhere. You could face it or not face it. And the game, it wasn't bad per se, but it was the first time that Resident Evil departed from the original formula. So the original idea of a survival horror. This was more a survival action horror. I still like it because it has that gameplay loop that a Resident Evil game, a survival horror game should have. So still it's there, but it's more action. That it is. Even the remake, in Resident Evil 2, you could basically break zombies' legs and arms. Here they don't. You can't basically shoot to a leg till the leg breaks and stuff like that. You can do that. It's more shoot to the zombies and destroy them with a bazooka grenade. But it's not like that you can play more like a classic survival horror. Sometimes you just gotta run through the zombies or nemesis. You just gotta go for it, and it's more action, but still it has element of survival that I like. And I think that Resident Evil 3, even the remake, even if the remake it's very lazy, it still works. But even the original was lazy, to be honest. The remake, it's lazier than the original because they decided to cut the entire part of the original game, and the entire part that people loved. The watchtower and the park, the whole enigmas in the park. They cut the whole thing. They decided to basically don't include the whole thing. And it's such a shame because it would have been very, 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 very interesting to have those elements in the remake. That's what I think. But I think that in order to speed up the process of release, they decided to cut those stuff. That's what I think. Maybe it's not true. Maybe there is a behind the scene that says that they just took another route and decided to not include those elements. But anyway, Resident Evil, the original, I have played it. The remake, I played. I have 2 or 3 run on the remake. Even if I didn't like the action part as much, even if Carlos sometimes it's over the top, whatever, but still I had 2 or 3 run on Resident Evil 3. So it's still something that I like, and it's up here. But on the podium, we have, of course, well, there are not that many left, Resident Evil Requiem. I loved Resident Evil Requiem. I'm not gonna ramble on for too much because there is my review, but I love this game because it's kind of a they basically managed to merge the logic of the remakes with the logic of the new era of Resident Evil with Resident Evil 7, that it goes back to the first Resident Evil and the second one with with Gray's gameplay. But at the same time, they managed to give to the audience the gameplay that they love with Leon and Resident Evil 4. So even if they renovated the whole concept, because anyway, Resident Evil Requiem gameplay wise, speaking of Leon, it's something a little bit more action than Resident Evil 4, but at the same time, it's not like Resident Evil 5 and 6. It's just a little bit more gory. It's just a little bit more. It has parries and finishers. Leon is almost. I mean, it's almost OP. I mean, it's very overpowered in a way, but it's fun. It's very fun to play. I love it, and even if some parts are not there, I think, but it's a game that I love, a gameplay design that I love. As well, I can say for Grace, I love the fact that basically you can play it even in third person, but the first person gives you that level of how can I say, you can really dig into the world of Resident Evil Requiem. It's very scary, it's very chilling sometimes, and it makes sense also thinking about the original gameplay loop that they're trying to bring back, because the hospital here, the first big map that you have, that is the hospital, is the same as Spencer mentioned, and then you go to the sewer, and it's very similar to the sewer in Resident Evil 2, and then you go to the laboratory, but that is the last part with both Leon and Grace gameplay. Same as per Leon. Leon, you have a more kind of village kind of gameplay. Not village, sorry, Resident Evil 4 kind of gameplay. You go back to the RPD and you have fun there, and it's very like Shadow Moses in Metal Gear Solid 4. And I think it works. The whole game. The only part that I said doesn't work, I think, for me at least, I think it's, well, the part with Leon and the motorcycle is terrible. It's terrible to play, to be honest. And I think that the last part of the game, the last chapter where in the laboratory where you play both Grace and Leon, you keep switching between them. I think it's the same mistake of other Resident Evil. The gameplay has no element to renovate, and basically became a little bit of it became stale a little bit, because it is giving back the same element over and over, but just they are just more stressed. So you have all those leakers and stuff like that. Doesn't work. To me, it doesn't work. It's just that they stretch the element of that gameplay too much, but still it's fun to play. It's not like you go like, oh, I hate this, because the sections are so small. It's not like you're gonna play for 2 hours with Leon, then 2 hours with Grace. It's very tidbit of gameplay of both of them, and it works, and it's fine. And even if it's stretch, is not that much. And even the narrative, it's fucked up at the end. It's very fucked up. That doesn't make sense, but still, you forgive it. You kind of forgive it, even if it doesn't make any sense at all. But it's okay. It's a game that I think it works, and I like the fact that, as I say in the review, in a way, it's what they're trying to say is that forget about Resident Evil, the first game. Everything started from Resident Evil 2. It's like if they're trying to create a sort of a new canon, and the new canon says that Leon Kennedy is the main character of the Resident Evil saga, and is like the hero of the Resident Evil saga, and he's the one that is trying to stop this conspiracy once and for all. And closing the chapter in Raccoon City is a necessary step he needs to take in order to close the circle of the Leon Kennedy saga. Doesn't matter if you have Jim Valentine, if you have Chris Redfield. Chris is still in the lore, but it's like if he is a shadow character. I don't know if you get what I mean. Leon Kennedy, I think they realized that it's the most powerful character they have. He's the hero of Resident Evil 2, that is one of the most beloved game of the saga. He's the hero of Resident Evil 4, again, one of the most beloved game of the saga. And now is the hero of Resident Evil Requiem that went pretty well. Speaking of sales, I think it's the game that sold the most copies because of Leon. Because it was like, I think that it would have not sold this well if it was just another Resident Evil. There was no RPD, there was no Leon. I think it would have sold well, but not this well. I think that they said, okay, this is the canon. This is the canon. Let's forget kind of everything else. This is our saga. Resident Evil 2, 4, Requiem. It's like if this is the actual trilogy in a way. They have done something like that. Everything else kind of exists, but it's kind of retconned in a way. In a way, as I said. But anyway, I love this game. I think it deserved to stay in the top 3. I'm going through a second run of the game and it's solid. I love it. And I love the fact that it brought back the ink ribbon as well for Grace. It's beautiful. The game design for the original kind of Resident Evil idea is beautiful. Then, drum roll, on the second place, we have Resident Evil, the first one, 1996. We are on the Arclays Mountain and there is Spencer Mansion and we have Jill Valentine, Chris Redfield, Albert Wesker, and the nightmare begins. That's where the saga starts. And I was so excited when I was a kid and I was very excited, and I love dearly the job that they have done with the HD remake. But actually, so many people said that game is not a remake. Yes, it's a remake. They changed game mechanics, they added more powerful zombie, they added a couple of location, they redo completely the graphics. I mean, the game engine, the mechanic under the hood are the same. But speaking of whatever is the models of the character and the pre-render background, they redo the whole thing, and the impact from the original Resident Evil from 1996 and this version remade in 2002. Well, it's a big jump. I love, because Spencer Mansion is more opulent. It's crazier in a way. It's darker, and the job that they've done with the fixed camera angle, thanks to the new technology, it's fantastic. It gives you, sometimes you have anxiety just because they work well with the camera angles, and it looks like, even if you realize that you are the one watching the character that you are playing, sometimes you have those camera angle outside the window, watching inside a hallway of Villa Spencer, watching Jill or Chris or whatever, and you think like, oh my god, someone is watching her, because it's so well built. This language, even if it's for you, it's also for you the fact that you have a feeling of you have an unsettling feeling that something is watching the main character. It's you, theoretically, but at the same time, it's like if someone else, something dangerous and nefarious is watching them, even if it's for you. But still, it's amazing. Talking about the original game, I think it's a masterpiece. Let me have some water. I think this game, talking about the original Resident Evil, but also the remake, It's a masterpiece. It's the game that defined the survival horror as a genre. Because I know many people are going to say, well, actually, if you go back in time with Maniac Mansion, that it was a point and click game, or if you go to Alone in the Dark, it's actually a survival horror, Alone in the Dark. Yes, it's kind of the first iteration of the survival horror in 3D. But at the same time, it doesn't have all the logic that Capcom introduced with Resident Evil. So the idea of managing your resources, the actual survivor mechanic, so that you have a few ammo, that you have those guns that you can upgrade and stuff like that if you solve other puzzles and stuff like that, guns that you can find if you solve other puzzles, stuff like that. The fact that sometimes you gotta play smart because you can finish the ammo, the exploration, the backtracking. It's basically the blueprint. Yes, it's the blueprint of the survival horror as a genre. From that game on, every other game that wanted to do a survival horror basically look at Resident Evil, what they have done. It's a blueprint. And for example, even take Silent Hill. Silent Hill, it's a survival horror, but it's very similar to Capcom as a concept. Even if you check Jesus Christ, I can talk. Silent Hill 2, it's very Resident Evil-ish in many ways. If you look Alan Wake 2, the general gameplay, the gameplay loop, the puzzles, the third-person perspective, it's very rooted into what Resident Evil has done with the first Resident Evil game and with the remakes when they redefined the genre. I'm gonna talk about that later on because, well, it's the last game in the list, on the list. But anyway, this was a masterpiece. Also because nowadays, something that I hate about game developing nowadays, it's a fantastic moment to be a gamer. To be honest, it's a fantastic moment to be a gamer. But at the same time, what I hate is that sometimes developing team spend too much time complaining about what they can't achieve because of the limits of the technology, instead of find a way to work around it. Because back in the day, a game like Resident Evil was born out of necessities. So they didn't have enough technology to make a Resident Evil like we would have made it today. So they decided to have the pre-render background, because otherwise that game would have been impossible to have with that level of fidelity and graphics. And so they used the pre-render as a workaround, as much as the second they decided to basically have that idea that when you go from one room to another and you open a door, you have a loading screen, but it's covered by the fact that you have those doors in the dark opening with the sound, and you have the anticipation of saying, I don't know what's from the other side of the door. And that element was an element of suspense, of horror, and sometimes it was used to create a jump scare or element of horror for scare you. And as I said, the fixed camera angle for the tank control, the fixed camera angle are used as element of storytelling for the gameplay. So to give you an idea of unsettling, something is watching over you, and it's not just a good framing choice for the gameplay, but it's also a way to convey anxiety and to make you feel unsafe while you explore Spencer Mansion. So it's great, it's genius, it's brilliant. And it was done because instead of thinking, oh my god, I don't have the technology to do this, they find a way to create what they wanted to create, and those elements created a genre and created an entire blueprint for the for the survival horror genre, and it was brilliant and genius, and I loved dearly that game. It was a game that scared the hell out of me, and I was scared. I remember the first time I tried to play was with that friend of mine, as I said before. He came over to my house for I think it was New Year's Eve, and we installed the game on my PC and we started to play, and like after an hour we were like, nope, we're gonna play something else, it's too scary. Sorry. Because we were kids, and we were like turning off all the lights to play in the dark. We play in the dark, so it's silly, but back then it was something, and this game was fun to play. And still nowadays I go like, if you want to play the first Resident Evil, the HD version, because it's called HD, Resident Evil HD generally speaking, and do it. Of course, it has the tank control that are not the best option out there, but the game is solid and I think you can play it. But anyway, I think it's a masterpiece. But then on the podium, of course, there is no mystery here. It's by exclusion. We have Resident Evil 2, because Resident Evil 2, I think it was a masterpiece. It was a masterpiece, and it is a masterpiece. And I believe that Resident Evil 2 is the most impressive and the perfect survival horror game ever made. The remake, I mean, about the original one, we're gonna talk about it as well. But I think that Resident Evil 2, it's perfect. The pacing, the design, everything is perfect about Resident Evil 2. I remember the original one was released in 1998, so a couple of years after. And I remember I used to read and buy and read those. In Italy, we had PlayStation Magazine. I think in the United States or somewhere else there was the same thing. But anyway, we had PlayStation Magazine, and I was buying those. I remember one of the issue had the cover of Resident Evil in front, and they were talking about Resident Evil. I think there was even a review. And I remember I had a CD with the demo of the game, if I remember correctly, and I played the demo over and over again. And then actually I remember I had a friend of mine that bought the game, and then we were going to his house to play all together Resident Evil 2. It was fantastic. Back then we used to do that. And then of course I played by myself as well, but we did that as well. And it was fantastic because the technology evolved, and then the pre-rendered background were way more detailed than the first Resident Evil. And it was shocking to see. I mean, I remember the first time I saw for example, I don't know, Raccoon City and all the cars smashed and the zombies and the people dead and the corpses. The first time I set foot into the RPD, it was insane. I mean, also because it's so iconic. This game is so iconic. I think it's the only game in Resident Evil where people remember the music, because the music are perfect. As soon as you step into the Raccoon City Police Department and you have that music, na 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 na, dun, 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 and it's so chilling. It's super. In theory, it's a super kind of quiet, but it's super chilling, and it's your blood turns ice cold. Go like, I'm gonna die here. There is no good reason to think that, but you think that I'm gonna die, totally gonna die here. This is terrible. I don't want to do this. And you're so scared. And the first game was so scary. I remember when I was walking into the other rooms, and where the window of the Raccoon City Police Department with the boards, the wooden boards, and if you were walking too close to the windows, there were the zombies and coming in from the boards and taking Leon and trying to hold him close to the windows. It was crazy. The first time I saw liquor and stuff like that, I remember everything, and it was glorious. It was glorious and amazing. And And that game is fantastic. And the fact that you had the two route A with Leon, or route B with Leon, and route A with Claire, and route B with Claire was fantastic. Replayability was everything. But then the reason I said because this game is perfect, it's because I think it's the perfect iteration of the survival horror, because I don't know how it happened or what happened, but the gameplay loop of Resident Evil, if we talk about the remake, but even the original, it's perfect. It's perfect. It's fantastic. It clicks so well. You are into the police station and you have the tree medallion to take, and the all the puzzle and the detonator and all the stuff that you can do at the police station at the beginning. They are so perfect. And then you go down to Birkin. When you go downstairs and you start to go around before the sewer, it's so perfectly made, because then you come back up and there is Mr. X and everything. And then when you go to the laboratory again, even the sewer, the old part in the sewer, it's perfect how the map is designed. All the chess pieces to activate the power, and the kind of enemy that you encounter, because in the police station is mostly zombies and leakers, but then you go into the sewer and there is those kind of mutated monsters that are just part of the sewer. And then you go into the laboratory, and once again, as I was saying before about gameplay that are too stretched and they have nothing to say. In Resident Evil 2, that doesn't happen, because every time you move to a new location, it's not just like that you have a huge new environment to discover with puzzles and with that gameplay loop of survival, discovery, unlocking stuff, shortcut and stuff like that. It's also that you have new enemy, and the new enemy respond to a new logic and new kind of weapons. And then when you go to the laboratory, and basically you have almost all the weapon except the one the electric one, you have those new kind of 3 zombies with the spot that you need to shoot to bring them down. Then you have a new weapon again. You have the flamethrower, so you can kill them definitely. The gameplay, it's new. Once again, it keeps renovating, it keeps changing, it keeps giving you a new weapon, a new solution to kill monsters, new monsters. And the gameplay loop, even if basically it's the same, it has element to turn into something new and something challenging once again. And as I said before, the gameplay for the whole thing, it clicks so well. In fact, once you finish the first time the game and you want to beat the game a second time, even if you decide to go, okay, I've done route A Leon, let's do route B Claire, even if the gameplay and the game experience change a little bit, because the route B is a little bit faster and Mr. X is a little bit more annoying, but anyway, you start to say, okay, now I know the whole thing. And then you start to optimize your journey. So you go like, okay, there was this thing here. I remember that I have the code. I can unlock this. And I don't know, I take the ammo to create ammunition, or I take this button that I can use in the room with all the supply for the police, so I can unlock, I don't know, a new shotgun or whatever, or the expansion for my items for the space, a new slot, a new couple of slots for the items and stuff like that. And you start to basically get sucked into but you get sucked in by the gameplay loop, and it starts to click in your head. In fact, there are a couple of trophies that are like, finish the game with, I don't know, this number of steps, because it's like all basically make it work in the smartest way possible, so to improve the way you solve of the puzzle. And it's so good and it's so amazing, and it works perfectly. And it's the perfect iteration of Resident Evil, and I think the perfect iteration of survival horror, because the longevity is perfect, the boss fights are fun and are well designed, I think the location, the characters, because this is the first Resident Evil that gives us some character that they have actual a dimension. I mean, Leon, Ada Wong, Kendo with the Kendo army shop in the remake. In the first one, Kendo is basically there and that's it. In the remake, Kendo is way more interesting. Even the writing of Resident Evil 2 remake, it's more bold, and the way the gameplay in the remake basically redefined the whole genre, the whole survival horror genre with the third person perspective instead of the first person perspective, and the way you manage the inventory and stuff like that. It's amazing. I love it. I mean, it's a game that it works under so many levels that it's insane, and I think that they manage amazingly well to redefine a genre. As I said before, if we have Silent Hill 2 remake, it's also because Resident Evil 2 remake, it's mainly because of Resident Evil 2 remake that was very successful, and it gave the blueprint to everyone to start making again those kind of survival horror. As well for Alan Wake 2, as well for I don't know, now Fatal Frame 2, they made a remake as well. And I think it's because of Resident Evil 2 and what Capcom has done with this genre. They gave new life to the genre. And I think it's fantastic. It's just simply amazing. And I have I have 6 runs, because I have 2 runs with Leon A, Claire B at normal. Then I have 2 runs with one with Leon B and Claire A, I think at normal again, or maybe at... No, I made it at hard, the difficult hard, and then I have a last 2 run at the easiest difficulty, just for the sake of try every iteration possible. And I had a blast. And it was fun. It's a game that it's funny, and I think that survival horror works best when you have this element of replayability. That's why, to me, Resident Evil Requiem is in the top 3, because it's a game that you can replay, even if a couple of parts that are very brief, thank God, they are not that fun to replay, but the majority of the game, it works. It works very very well in order of even consider replayability, because once you finish a first run, you unlock some stuff, and the second run it's different. You have more confidence, you have new objects, and you have new challenges, and it's way more interesting when you have those kind of stuff that will make the second run interesting and some way fastest. But yeah, I think this is a masterpiece. I think this is always going to be probably my favorite Resident Evil. I don't know if they will manage to release a Resident Evil that is, I don't know, that works this well. I think the only chance that they've got is if they manage to make a remake of the first Resident Evil, where they manage to write a compelling character for Jill or Chris, because this is the problem of the first Resident Evil and Jill and Chris. They have not such a big, basically, characterization like Leon. Leon is a very simple character, but he managed to reach the heart of the audience, of the players. Jill, in Resident Evil 3, I think she works, at least on a aesthetic level. I think she works. The problem is that it would be better to have Jill in a remake of the first Resident Evil to kind of set the tone for what we see in Resident Evil 3. That's what I think that would be good. I think if they manage to make a great remake, a great reinvention of the first Resident Evil, it can top Resident Evil 2 as a game. It can potentially be my favorite Resident Evil of all the time, because the only problem is that the HD remake has the tank control and stuff like that. If would be ideal to not have those anymore and to have a full remake. And I think that if they are going to do it, they are going to do to kind of reboot the saga, or just to close the original saga according to what they have done with the remake of Resident Evil 2 or what they've done with Resident Evil Requiem. But it's a remake that can see the light of the day, I think, or to reboot the saga, or to basically have a remake according to what they made recently, but in order to give a new life, a new opportunity to be another Resident Evil game to Jill and to Chris. I think that's it. I think that this what can happen potentially. But the first game has so much potential to be a great Resident Evil game if they make a remake. And I think this saga is gonna be always recognized as the saga that shaped the genre, the survival horror as a genre. Without this, we will never have Silent Hill, Alan Wake, and more other stuff. And I think that in the future, if they want to remake Resident Evil 5 and 6, probably after Resident Evil 1 remake, so after the first, so you can bring back Jill and Chris and they will make sense for the audience, they have to redo the whole thing, the narrative, the gameplay. They really have to set their record straight according to what they've done with the remake. But I think that's what is going to happen. They will remake the first Resident Evil and then they will remake probably 5 and 6, but with a new perspective, most likely. That's what I think. But I would love, to be honest, to see a completely new Resident Evil. I would love that. If they release Resident Evil Code Veronica remake, Resident Evil 0 remake, and Resident Evil 1 remake, I'm gonna buy them. I'm not gonna lie. What I would like to see from the industry is make physical collection. I would totally buy a collection of Resident Evil 2, 3, 4, and whatever, 1 if they make a remake, or 0. I will totally buy a collection. Because honestly, I just recently started to buy physical copy of games, but I would like to basically buy even other version. So that's it. Let me know what are your thoughts and see you next time. Bye.